Cool. All right, thank you all for coming. Today I'm going to talk about getting started with Cosmos DB, especially within the context of EF Core. So who here has used Cosmos DB before? No? Couple? Cool. Anti-framework? Awesome, 90% of the room, that's pretty good. All right, my name is Thiago Passos. I'm a solution architect working for myself in Brisbane, Australia. It was a very long flight to get here. I've been doing consultant work for over, I don't know, 15 years now. I've been sharing a bunch of stuff that I've been doing with Vue.js, Angular, a bunch of Azure stuff in my blog if you want to have a look. The whole code that I'm going to show today here is in my GitHub as well. And my Twitter, if you want to follow me or get in touch or anything. So let's see about the agenda. So I'm going to talk about what is Cosmos DB. And I'm going to try to convince you to start using it. I'm going to show you how to get started. I'm going to share a few of the tooling that I use, both for development and for some migration. And then I'm going to add EF Core to that mix. All right, I'm going to show you how to implement, how to use Cosmos DB with anti-framework. All right, first, what is Cosmos DB? So Cosmos DB is a multi-model database service for managing data at a planet scale. And it's also called NoSQL. All right? From this sentence here, everything looks all right, okay? NoSQL is well-known, a service that's managed, and scale looks all right. But when it comes to multi-model, it's kind of funny how a database can be multi-model. And this is because they have, Cosmos DB have a bunch of available APIs. And this means that an instance of Cosmos DB can be used with all these APIs. So you don't need to learn from scratch how to talk to the data, right? So if you're familiar with SQL, you're going to be fine using the SQL API. If you're familiar with Mongo or Grammarly or Cassandra or table storage, there is nothing new that you need to learn. The learning curve is going to be quite small to get started with Cosmos DB, which is pretty good. So think about Cosmos DB as a big umbrella, right? So we have all these database types, which all those APIs will fit into one of those database types. But all of them will have all these nice features, which is the distribution, the elastic scale out, the guaranteed low latency and availability and all that. Also the consistency levels, which we're going to cover a little bit. And Azure has this awesome comprehensive SLA, which is this contract from Microsoft and their customers, which they guarantee 99.99% of availability, latency, and all that, which is pretty interesting. Let's talk about the global distribution and how easy it is to scale that, like to add more read regions, okay? I come from Australia, so I created an instance in Australia East. So you can see that the right region is Australia East. And now what I'm going to do is I want to scale my application. So my application is going to be used in Asia. It's going to be used in Europe, in the US, and Brazil, where I'm from. And that's how easy it is. So with a few clicks, you have the data in sync with multiple regions across the globe. That's how simple it is. So you don't need to be an expert in infrastructure. You don't need to do any of that. And for us developers, at least for me, I'm not an IT specialist. I'm not an infrastructure specialist. So for me, creating all that sync, it would be pretty hard. And back in the day, doing that with SQL, it would be a nightmare. All right, consistency levels. So what does that mean? What's all about consistency levels? So there are 5 consistency levels, and it's like a scale, right? So as you go stronger, a strong consistency, you're gonna pay more, right? So I'm going to talk about the 5 consistency levels, and I'm going to show you in a very visual way so you can understand what they are. So we've got the strong consistency. So think about the first line, the first music chart as being the write region, okay? So as you write data, all the read regions across all your cluster, they will be in sync, and that's going to be straight away. So that's going to be the most expensive consistency level that you're going to get, right? Then you have the bounded sailors. So the read and write will have a strong consistency. But as you go to other regions, you're going to have a slight delay, which is 5 seconds or 100 versions, whichever is smaller, all right? And that's acceptable for most of the applications we write, okay? Then you have the session, and the session is the default one and the most popular one, where you have the regions in a session, and every region in that session will have that strong consistency. For the regions outside that session, we're going to have a small delay. And that delay is going to be bigger than the other consistency level, which is bounded sailors. But it still is not a big deal. It's not that huge. Then we have the consistent prefix. Well, you're going to see that the consistency level is dropping, and at some point you're going to think, why would I use that at all? All right, so as we write here, you can see that the other regions, the read regions, they are getting the data in the same order. And for this one, it's important that the data is in the same order. So you have a slight delay for every read regions, but they're still in order. And then comes the eventual consistency. I guess a lot of people have heard about that. And for me, when I saw that the first time, I thought, why the heck would I even use that? So you write data, and you might get the data in whichever order it comes. It's like completely random. Why would I use that? It actually applies to a lot of cases, right? For example, for social media, when you have tweets or followers or likes, it doesn't matter if you have 10 here, 10 likes here, and 9 in Australia, and eventually every region is going to be in sync. So it doesn't really matter that count is different in different regions for a slight delay, okay? And that's what it means. Okay, so what about the comprehensive SLA? So it's a contract between Microsoft and the customers, of course, and they ensure that they're going to give you 99.99% of availability, throughput, consistency, and latency. If they don't provide that, it's in their contract. If it's lower than 99.99%, they're going to give you 10% of credit back. If it's lower than 99%, they're going to give you 25% back, which is pretty amazing. So for a company to do that, well, they need to have the whole infrastructure to back them up, otherwise they will lose money. So again, why would you use Cosmos DB in the first place? Well, all that I covered. So you have the global scalable with one click, which is amazing. It's fully managed, so it's serverless. It's got all these guarantees of low latency, reliability, availability, and all that. And for a developer, I think the most important thing here is that you have these multiple APIs where you don't have, that learning curve is almost it's almost non-existent because you can use that same API that you used. And how do I get started? How to get started with Cosmos DB? So it's pretty simple. So you can go to Azure now. You can click on that plus button. You can look for Cosmos DB. And then you can create that instance, all right? You're going to select your API from here. Just if I haven't told you at this point here, the API is selected on the creation time. So it's not something that you can change the API after you create the instance. It's selected when you create the instance. Okay, then you get started. So you can click on that Quickstart, and then you can choose your platform. I've been using .NET Core for 4 years now, since it was in beta 4 in production, so a bit crazy. And from here, you can create the items collection, which items in Cosmos DB is like a table in SQL. right? And for me, this example, this Quickstart, from all the products that I've used in the past, that was the snappiest, the best Quickstart that I've ever seen. And I'm going to show you why that's the case. So you can create one. You're going to create the items collection, and then you can download a copy of that Quickstart code, right? And for all the products around, you would download your code, and then you would put some keys, and then you would be connected to your instance, right? Not with this one. So you can download that, and what's going to happen is you're just going to press F5, and off you go. You're connected to your instance. And for me, that was amazing. That was mind-blowing. So I'm going to do a quick demo here. So I've got an instance in Azure already. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that instance, that items collection. And I'm going to download that app. All right? So you can see that happening in real life. Okay. Oops. All right, so I'm going to download that. Unzip. Who here uses Writer? No, just a few. It's amazing. Should use it. All right, so I'm going to open this solution with Writer. All right, so what's going to happen here, it's going to load the project. It's going to restore the dependencies, and I'm just going to press F5 and open the application just to see how it works. All right? Okay, it's syncing, restoring. All right, so it's all good. I'm going to press F5, and I'm going to run the application. So the application should open in the browser now. This is an MVC with .NET Core application. That's a very simple application. And as usual, it's just a to-do app. Okay? So we're going to open that now. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do, let's just wait that to finish. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to Azure so I can open the Data Explorer in there. Okay. So I'm going to open that in full screen, just so we can see that when we run the application, when we create data, that's showing up in our instance. Okay, so you can see that we have that collection that was created when I pressed the button, and I have no documents at this point in time. Okay? So I can go to my to-do list here, my to-do app, and I'm going to create a few to-do items. So I'm going to buy some milk on my way home. Let's create a few more here. So I'm going to have breakfast with my mate Jason. Well, in fact, I already had. So I have to change that later. And I'm gonna, let's say, bring juice for some reason. Let me see. For Brandon to drink. All right, so just one last one that I'm gonna create, just so we can have enough data to play with in Cosmos DB, and I'm going to drink more water in the morning. As I said, I had breakfast with Jason already, so I'm just going to edit that so I can set that to completed. All right, so now I have 4 items. One of them is completed. Okay, so I'm going to go to Cosmos DB now. I'm going to refresh, and you're going to see that we have 4 documents in the instance that I just created. Okay? All right, so the only difference there is that this complete is true. And I'm going to create a new query. So this looks like SQL, right? Select star from C. And what's this C? With Cosmos DB, when you run a SQL query, the context of that query is the collection. It's not like SQL, that's the whole database. It's within that collection. So if you want to do joins and things like that, that's going to be within the collection. Okay? And there are reasons for that. And this is because it's a document database under the covers. And essentially, you store all that in a single, everything that you need in a single document. So let's run that and see what it comes back. So hopefully it's going to come back with the 4 records that I created. Okay. So let's run. And there you go. I've got the 4 records that I created. Okay. So let's see how the syntax works here. So I'm going to do a where C dot is complete or complete equals true. Okay, so if I run that, I should get a single one. Okay, so that's not SQL, so it can be different. So I can basically remove that equals true because it's going to work the same way. With SQL, that wouldn't work. And also I can do a not is complete, and that would work as well. What else can I do here? So let's try something else. So let's try name like beer. So that's a valid SQL statement, isn't it? So let's try it out. So if I run that, now I get an error. So that's not valid. So there are some differences with this transact SQL. So in this case, I should use contains, and then the name, the field, and what I want to check inside. So I can run that. All right, so there is no beer in my documents. Just juice. All right, so let me. That's an error. There should be beers inside there. That's not right. So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna check what's inside. So there is milk, there's breakfast, juice. Yeah, there is juice. There's water. So I'm gonna try water. All right. What's that? Beer. Brandon just drinks beer. Yeah. So I'm gonna try water. So they should bring something back now. Cool. So I've got something. All right. But I still think that's a bug. All right. I still think that's a bug. All right. So I'm gonna just get the fields I want now. I'm gonna get the ID, the name, and it's complete because I don't want all that stuff coming back. All right. So that's the same way that SQL works. All right, so Cosmos DB has a bunch of features as well. So Cosmos DB has also store procedures, triggers, and user-defined functions. So it's like SQL, but the way they behave is a bit different. So you can see that on the top there we have new store procedure, so we can create that. And it's basically a JavaScript function, which is pretty amazing, right? So you don't need to know SQL at all. You can just write a JavaScript function in there, and it's going to work. So I'm going to create a new user-defined function, and I'm going to fix that bug. I'm going to create a BFI function. I'm going to get that value, and I'm going to do a replacement here. I'm going to return the value replace. I'm going to write some regular expression here. I'm going to replace by beer, all right? So that was a bug, and I'm keen to fix that bug. So I'm going to create a regular expression. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace globally. And I'm going to get, let's see, juice. I'm going to replace juice, water, breakfast, and milk. So I'm going to replace all of that by beer because I need to fix that bug. All right, so now the way we can use that in the query or in the field itself. So what I'm going to do is UDF BFI, name. And I'm also going to put an alias for that as name. And I'm going to run that. So you can see the bug's fixed. Now I need to buy beer. I need to have beer with my mate Jason. And what else? I need to bring beer for Brendan because he doesn't drink juice. And I need to drink more beer in the morning. I guess, I don't know if my liver is going to handle all that, but yeah, let's see. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that project. So you see that the Quickstart project is working fine. So I just press F5 and everything is linked up, which is pretty good. But before that, we also have triggers, and these triggers you can assign to an operation, right? To any operation when you create, when you delete, when you replace some documents. And you can also trigger that either before updating or after, which is pretty good. But let's go now to the project. Okay, just zoom out a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to show you here is how that project works. So it's a simple MVC application. So we've got that item controller, which is just to create, delete, update items. And we've got this document DB repository. Okay, so just zoom in here. So let me search for the create. All right, so we've got this create async, which is the one that we used. So it's going to receive an item, and it's going to use that repository to create an item. So let's see the implementation of that. And that's all the sample code, which is pretty good. And then we have all that key and the endpoint already in the code. I agree that it's not best practice to put these keys in the code. It should be in an app config or web config or something like that. But well, it's working, so you know exactly where to change if you want to apply to a different collection or to a different database. And what I'm going to show you here is the NuGet package that you use to connect to Cosmos DB. So that's not using EF Core, so that's just using the default library, which is the document DB. All right, so with that document DB in place, we can create that client document DB with that endpoint and the key that you saw just above. And I'm going to use that client in a few places. Is that simple? Cool. All right. So let's talk about the toolings. And that's something that I learned the hard way. So last year, I went to NDC Sydney as well, and I presented a talk about logic apps, which was pretty cool. Logic apps is pretty interesting. And what I did was I was gathering a bunch of tweets within that conference, and I was running through a bunch of cognitive services just to see the level of happiness and all that. And I was pushing all that to Cosmos DB instance, okay? And after the conference was gone, I had all this data in my Cosmos DB instance, and I didn't know what to do with this data. And I didn't have time to think about what to do with the data. So I left there for a while. So I was paying like $100 a month just for the instance. Well, I'm not a company. $100 a month for nothing is quite a lot. I can drink a lot of coffee with $100 a month. But it was there, and I didn't know what to do, and it was there, and I was paying that money every month. So eventually I found out about this tool, this data migration tool, which I should have searched before, right? This tool is pretty cool. So what it does is, it's almost like that SQL tool to get data from one place and push to the other, which is pretty interesting. And that's how it works. So I'm just going to open that same instance that I had, and I'm going to show you how to extract that data that we just added and just put somewhere else, okay? So I'm going to open now, I've got that tool available. Just a second. Okay, so I've got that tool available here. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go to source information, and I'm going to select document DB. So you see that I can have multiple source types. So I'm going to need the connection string. So I'm going to go to keys here in Azure, and I'm going to copy that connection string. Also, I'm going to open the Data Explorer just to make sure that the database name and the collection name is there. So I'm going to set the database name here to to-do list. And the collection to items. And I'm going to set a query. So this query could be any query, any valid query. And I'm going to save that to a local JSON file, just so I can extract all the data that's currently in Cosmos DB, so I can have that. So that's what I did in the past. Okay, so I'm going to press next. I don't care about the logs, and I'm going to import that. Awesome. I'm going to close that up, and I'm going to open that file that's in my desktop. Awesome. I'm just going to format that, and there you go. That's how simple it is to extract the data. All right? So I should have known that before I spent $100 a month for a while. Cool. There's also a tool called Cosmos DB Emulator, and if you are planning to do any development using Cosmos DB, that's a must for you, right? So you need to install that locally, so you don't need to spin up any instance in Azure, so you can work completely offline, completely locally with that, which is pretty cool. So let's see how that works. So I'm going to run a demo with that as well. Okay. So I'm going to start here the Cosmos DB emulator. I should have done that before. Hopefully the computer's not going to crash on me. Okay, so it's starting the emulator. And as soon as it started, it's going to open the browser with that instance, that local instance running. So you can see that at the top, I've got localhost 8081, as you can see. And it's like Azure, but it's running locally, just for Cosmos DB. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that primary connection string, and I'm going to update my application, that to-do application. So you can see that there is no database. I'm going to update that to-do database, that to-do application, to use the local database instead, the local Cosmos DB. So I'm going to paste that here. So the format seems a bit different, so I'm just going to put the endpoint up. Just copy that. And I'm going to remove this trash here. Awesome. So let's run that again. And once I run, and once I add items to my Cosmos DB instance, it's going to go to my local instance. Okay? Which is cool, because now you don't need to pay anything just to start working with it, just to learn how to use Cosmos DB locally. All right, so you can see that now the application is running, and it created automatically the to-do list and items, but I have no documents. So I'm going to go and create a document. That's the local instance. I'm going to create. Awesome. Now you can see the documents there, and it's running locally. All right, so everything else will work the same way, which is pretty good. Awesome. So let's talk about EF Core. And that's going to be how to implement, how to use the Cosmos DB with EF Core. But I've got a bit of a story to tell with that. When I found out about this Cosmos provider for EF Core, I was really, really excited. And that was, I don't know, about 6 months ago. So I was really, really excited. I even wrote a blog post about it. And I was the 72nd person to download the package. So it was pretty early on. But I was really excited. I wanted to use, and I managed to use, so I wrote a blog post about it. So I was pretty excited. And then I found out that I was coming here. I was coming to NDC London to present about it. And as as I use my blog, I create a post so I can reference back to myself, so I can remember the kind of stuff that I was doing. So if I get stuck again, I get back to my blog to see what I did in the past. So I went there to start preparing for this talk. And I went to the code, and I tried to run, and it wasn't working. It was working before. What's going on? And then I saw that the NuGet package wasn't coming. I'm sure that was coming before. So I went to NuGet.org, and I couldn't find. What's going on? There is something pretty bad going on here. So I went to NuGet.org. I couldn't find, and eventually I found the link that went straight to that NuGet package in NuGet.org. And I found that. I was, oof, that's good. Everything's going to work now. That's all good. But as I was writing the NuGet package, I was reading, I saw this yellow box there. And I was about to come here. So I saw the owner has unlisted this package. This could mean that the package is deprecated or shouldn't be used anymore. I was far out. How can I present on something that it shouldn't be used? I'm in so much trouble, so I started freaking out. But then eventually I found out that they actually renamed the NuGet package. They just ditched the .SQL from the name. And I could breathe again. It was good. All right, so let's see how that works. So let's see how that's implemented. So I'm going to use that local instance now. I'm not going to use the Azure instance. I'm going to use the local instance. I'm going to copy that connection string. So I've got a code sample that I wrote for this talk, and it's available on GitHub if you guys want to check it out. So that's EF core Cosmos. So I'm going to open that up in Writer, of course. Okay, so I hope it's not going to take long to load. All right, so I'm going to show you around the application a little bit just so you can understand. I'm just going to first update the app settings.json with that local instance. So I'm going to paste the key here, and I'm going to replace, choose the endpoint. Don't copy the key, man. No, don't take a photo of the key. All right. Okay, so this application is a sample application. And all I have here is, so you saw the name of the database is blog, and I'm going to store here authors, categories, and posts. Okay, as simple as that. And in post, you have a reference to author, and you have a reference to category. Okay. Okay, so I've got a single controller here. So I'm using the SPA template to create this application. And I've got a post controller just to create a post and to retrieve all the posts, just to test it out. Okay, so let's see the implementation of that posts. Okay, so I'm getting a post model here, which is bringing the name, the author, and stuff like that. So I'm initiating an entity, the post entity. I'm going to bind the title, the author. So I'm creating an author when I bind, and I'm creating a category when I bind. Okay, so then I use the DB context to add that new entity, and I save the changes. So pretty vanilla stuff, right? Anything different than you guys usually do? No? Okay. All right, so let's have a look at the persistency now, the persistence. So the DB context looks exactly the same as any DB context, right? So I've got a bunch of DB sets for posts, categories, and author, but there is nothing new. There is nothing different in the DB context. So it's using EF core here, and there is no difference. And the only difference here is going to be in the startup. So if I was using SQL, what I would do here is when adding the context, I would use SQL, right? But in the case of Cosmos DB, I'm going to use Cosmos DB, and I'm going to add that add entity framework Cosmos, which comes from that NuGet package. And that's pretty much it. So there is nothing more to it. But we're going to see how it's going to behave. Okay, so I'm going to run now. So let me zoom out a little bit. All right, so I'm going to run the application. And I'm going to go to the application. Pretty simple. I'm going to list the posts. And I'm going to go to my local instance, and I'm going to see that I have a blog database and a blog DB context collection. Well, I didn't like that in the first place. It didn't feel right. I was expecting to see posts, authors, and categories, right? But instead, I got this blog DB context. Well, that's fine. So I'm going to create a blog just so we can see how that behaves. So getting started with Cosmos DB. The category is going to be Cosmos, and the author is Thiago Passos. And the content is awesome. So I'm going to create that. So the post is going to come back here eventually. There you go. And I'm going to go to my emulator, and I'm going to refresh that. All right, so now I have 3 documents coming up. And I didn't understand it in the first place. It didn't make any sense. So I went there, and I checked that it was a post, so the content is awesome. The title is getting started with Cosmos DB. But it's got this discriminator. It's got a post discriminator. And it's got this author ID and category ID. So as I went to the next document, I saw that each document is related to a different entity. Okay? And then I started thinking that that was actually a pretty cool implementation. So it used polymorphism out of the box, and you don't need to configure anything. So it's all in the same bucket. Which later on I found out that I learned that was actually a pretty cool idea, because the collections in Cosmos DB, they scale separately. So you can create collections to scale differently. Okay? But I didn't like that. So I didn't like the fact that the name was the name of the DB context. So I want to update that. So I'm going to update the DB context here. So I'm going to get that model builder and get the infrastructure. And I'm going to override the convention of Cosmos DB. And I'm going to set the default container name to default instead of having blog DB context. Okay? So if I write that now, if I run this now, what I'm expecting to see is the default collection coming up in my database. Okay? So I'm going to run that. Okay. All right, let me open that here. So I'm going to refresh. Obviously, no post is going to come back, because now it's reading from the default collection. And if I refresh my instance here, my local instance, you're going to see that I have a default collection now, instead of that blog DB context. So I'm going to create a post just to try it out. And everything now should go to that default context, the default collection instead. Okay. So the post should come back. Awesome. And now I have the 3 documents coming in the default collection. All right, so for me that was a win, because now I have more control over the convention. All right, so I really didn't like having the name of the collection with the name of the DB context. All right, but I still don't like the fact that posts and categories and authors are in the same bucket. So I want to separate that. So let's see how we can separate. I'm just going to stop here. So I'm going to use that model builder again, but now I'm going to get that entity, and I'm going to override the metadata of that entity, and I'm going to set the container name for that specific entity, okay? So what I'm expecting to see now is when I create a post, that's going to go to the post collection, and everything else should go to the default collection. All right? So I'm going to refresh here. It should bring back one post. Okay. Or not, because I created a post, sorry. So it shouldn't bring any post because there is no post there. So I'm going to create a post now. Okay, add. And now if I go back to my emulator and refresh, I should have the post in the post collection, right? And everything else, the author and the category, will show up in the default collection, all right? With the background that I had with SQL, I still didn't like this idea, right? Even though this is actually something that you should do because all the data that's not the main data, it's probably a good idea to put in the same bucket because then you can scale that less than the main data. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a method which I'm using reflection just to go through the DB sets of my DB context. And I'm just going to set all that to set the container name for each of the DB sets. All right, so I'm going to call that. And now when I run, I should have all the DB sets in separate collections. Does that make sense? So let's run. Okay, so if I update now, the post should come back with no category and no author, because now they're coming to a different collection, but the post is still coming from posts. So should have a post with no category and author. Cool. So now if we refresh here, we're going to have all these collections coming up, authors and categories. Cool, so now it's looking like more like the way you would program with SQL, right? Even though it's not something that you should do, you should put some data that will scale differently in one bucket. So when I add that now, I should have a new post and a new author in the author collection, and a new category in the category collection. Cool? All right, so as I said, I wouldn't do that for a real life application, right? I would put posts in its own collection or any main data in its own collection, because then I can scale that differently. So if I have more users, I'm going to scale that main data more so users can get access to that data way quicker. And then for any auxiliary data, I would put all the auxiliary data in one bucket so I can scale that less. Does that make sense? All right, so if you're ready for that, there is a Cosmo task list on GitHub. It's a GitHub issue in the Cosmos DB, in the anti-framework core account. And you can check what's available right now. So they have a lot of stuff available. So you can see that in preview 1, they built a bunch of stuff. And then if you go ahead, right now they are on preview 3.0 preview 3. And RTM is coming soon. So hopefully it's coming soon. There is no date yet. But you can see the plan. It's almost like a board, a Kanban board for them, which is pretty good. So let's summarize here. So I know we're a bit short on time, which will give you more time to drink coffee. But let's summarize. So what is Cosmos DB and why? Mainly because, well, it's awesome. So you should give it a try. You should try to work with that. It's amazing. The getting started is so nice. The experience, for me, it was the best experience I've had in a long time. The best F5 experience in a long time that I had. Even for the projects I write. So I usually don't put any details there to just press F5 and work, right? So that was pretty nice. And the wiring up with DF Core, I really like the implementation that they did. It's not fully done yet, but well, I've been using .NET Core since it was beta 4 years ago in production. So I had my headaches, but well, I got it there. So if the features that you're looking for are already in the Cosmos DB provider, just go and use it. You're going to have some headaches, but well, you're going to get it to the other end. So I shared also some tooling, so the data migration and the Cosmos emulator, and that's something that you should definitely have a look if you want to start using Cosmos DB. And also I shared with you the task list. So check the task list, see what's there, see if you're happy with the features that are available right now, and start using it. Thank you very much. What? Sorry. Questions?
Question?
Yeah.
Is there any support for those user-defined functions from NDC framework?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. Yeah, not at this point. Not that I know of. You can run SQL, you can write the SQL and then just run with DF Core. It's not ideal, but you can. Any more? No? All good. Thank you very much.